Welcome to episode 91, where today we're going to talk about superheroes and social media. And our guest for the show is someone that you'll be excited about because not only is this person a lover of comics, but he's been the person behind some very popular character social media accounts. Let's go. Hi, and welcome to the Captioned Life, a show for the most casual and dedicated fans of comics and a member of the Comic Watch family. I'm your host, Sean. Join me and discover what the world of comics and graphic novels have to offer. From one-on-one interviews with industry professionals, roundtable discussions with passionate fans, and reviews on the latest comics, TV shows, and movies. Now let's dive right on in. Hey, welcome back to the show. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about superheroes and social media. Now, if you're on social media, you're probably following some of your favorite comic book publishers and entertainment companies like Marvel, DC, Disney, etc. You probably also noticed that some characters from those properties have their own social media account as well, such as Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, even Deadpool. I always thought this was an interesting concept. So today I wanted to bring someone on the show who knows this world of superheroes and social media very well. So please welcome Jon-Stephen Stansel. Jon-Stephen is an award-winning social media professional with over a decade of experience managing, building, and creating content for brand social media accounts. He has run social media accounts for Amazon Prime's Invincible animated series, Hyper RPG, Black Market Narrative and their series Radiant Black, Rogue Sun, and other comics in the Massiveverse. The University of Central Arkansas, Texas State University, the Texas Department of Transportation, as well as consulting for many television series, films, and small businesses. He is currently the director of social media at Chaotic Good Studios. Jon-Stephen, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Doing well. Thanks for having me, Sean. I'm excited to be here and talk shop.
I'm excited to have
my two favorite things, social media and comic books.
Right? Yeah. Like, and this is the thing I always love about trying to do this show is not just focus on comic books, but how they intersect with the real world. And so this was a really great way to kind of talk about like how comics live in the world that we're around and to have this conversation about social media and how it merges with that. I'm very excited to talk about this with you, and especially with your background that you kind of have, both feet in both worlds and everything is really great. I was thinking about this the other day. I cannot recall how you and I actually initially connected. I know we connected on Twitter, but
I believe so. Yeah. It's always, the power that happens to me so often. It's like, on social media, people kind of filter into your circles and you start interacting with them. You go, oh yeah, we've got these friends in common, or we know, and we're not really sure where that connection came from, but I'm glad that we made that connection and now we're here, chatting on Zoom here. So it's great.
Yeah, same here. Well, and what I recall most is that, again, I can't remember how we actually connected, but I remember you were talking about your time as a marketing or social media person for higher ed. I remember reaching out saying like, oh, I work in higher ed. So that was a really cool connection that we had. Mm-hmm. And then later on, we both found out that we have like a love for comics and everything. And so it was just really funny that the way that we connected was actually not even related to comics to begin with. So I remember that distinctly, mm-hmm. that we talked about higher ed first before going into comics. But yeah, and I know that you had just came back from a trip of being a speaker at a conference as well too, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a higher ed conference. I'm no longer in higher ed, but it's fun to kind of have still like a foot in that world, mm-hmm. and was talking about what universities can learn from the entertainment industry on social media and their accounts, and how they can apply some of the same techniques that movies and TV shows and other areas of the entertainment industry to what they do with their students, and how to treat their students the same way we treat fans. And like your physics department can have a fandom. Like, yeah. You don't think about that, but like students can be just as engaged with the academic side as they are with the athletic side. So we talked a little bit about that. It was a lot of fun to do.
Oh, that's really
cool.
I got
to give a presentation to a bunch of higher ed folks that had references to Harley Quinn, Invincible, of course, and Firefly. So that was fun.
Oh my gosh. Well, and I'm sure that a lot of them were eating that up as well too, And
oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of people don't realize how those strategies can kind of overlap or cross borders. Just because it's an entertainment doesn't mean that that strategy wouldn't work in other areas as well too. So it's all about
Exactly.
looking at that and then adapting it to your, for lack of a better term, like brand or department or whatever, and making that work and everything. So that's really cool to hear that.
Yeah, it was a blast.
Oh, good. Before we get into the episode, I wanted to share this with you. I've shared this with some people already, but I figured you would probably really appreciate this and find this funny. And you may have seen me tweet about this already. So if you have seen this, I apologize. But have you seen me talk about my first pull quote that's been printed on a Marvel comic?
No, tell me about that. That's awesome.
Oh my gosh. So this is what happened yesterday. So to kind of set the framework for everybody is that a pull quote is basically when a comic book publishing company will put out a collection of the issues of a story that was ran. So it could be like, a collection of like 6 issues or 20 or whatever. They usually put in a collection called trade paperbacks or a hardcover or something like that. And I was reading Nightcrawler's issue number 2 last night. And as I was reading it towards the end of the issue, they had an ad for a hardcover that they're coming out of Marvel Fortnite Zero War that they printed out, I think like last year or 2 years ago. And then I saw a pull quote from Comic Watch, which is who I do comic reviews for. And to keep in mind, like we do not get told by the comic book publishing companies ahead of time if they're using one of our pull quotes. So a lot of times when I'm going to my comic shop, I'm looking for those quotes to see if anything comes from Comic Watch so I can share with the team and everything. But what's interesting is they had one from Comic Watch, and I was the person that did all the reviews for all the issues for Marvel Fortnite Zero War. So I know this was my quote because I was the only person that reviewed it. Do you know what that quote was?
What?
It just said phenomenal.
But it's still cool. It's still cool that's your word there.
It is. Yeah. It was just funny because I got really excited. And then the more I thought about it, I'm like, that's just like one word. Like that could have been anything. Like anyone could have said that, just as phenomenal dash Comic Watch. So it was kind of like a little disappointing that it wasn't a full quote, but I was still excited about that. I just thought it was really funny that was like the first pull quote of mine that got printed on a book, a Marvel book of all, books and all that. But it was just the word phenomenal was all that was on there. So I thought you would get a kick out of that because we talked about things
awesome.
like that.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah, exactly. I need to start working the word phenomenal into the show, like the phenomenal Captioned Life show, something like that.
Make it your catchphase. Like that's your brand now. You're the phenomenal guy.
Yeah. Oh my! I'm going to have to do rebranding, and you're going to have to help me out with this. Does that sound good?
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Awesome. All right, so let's talk a little bit about superheroes and social media. But before we get into that, every guest I have on the show, I ask them the same question, and that is, what is your comic book origin story? What or who got you into comic books?
Okay, well, yeah, I kind of have 2 separate origin stories. I would say, like, there's the personal one where growing up, going to the supermarket with my mom in the 80s and like getting to go to the comic book show when you could still buy them at the supermarket, right? And get dollar issue of Archie and Richie Rich and all those. And then I remember, probably was it 1992 or so, a comic book shop opened in my town, and it was right about the time Image Comics started.
Oh,
and I remember walking in there and seeing like the first issues of Spawn and Youngblood and all those, and it was just like, comics before, and then like it was like Dorothy going into Oz, like everything's black and white in color, like all the pages are suddenly shiny and glossy, and everything's just this amazing art. Not to say not anything pre-image, but it was just like a new, to be 12 years old and like go from the comics that you had in the supermarket that were like I said, like Richie Rich and Archie, to, oh my goodness, this is something completely, mind blowing, and just was absolutely hooked. And have been a comics fan, ever since. And then professionally, how I got into working with in comics, just sheer luck. I was doing social media marketing in higher ed, working for a university, and honestly, I was just getting completely burnt out. And COVID and crisis comms and angry parents and all of that, and just every day just tired and and I was frustrated. And my wife was like, one thing I did in higher ed though was going to conferences and presenting and talking about social media on Twitter and talking about what I do, but also intersecting that with my interests. So it would be tweets about social media and also like comic book and nerd stuff. And I quickly gained a lot of followers. I had about 10,000 followers at the time. And my wife was like, you know what? You're not happy doing this right now. And why don't you just quit and put it out there on Twitter that you're looking for a new job and see what happens? And I was like, scared to death to do that. And I was like, no, go put in your 2 weeks notice today or you're in trouble with me. So I'm like, I'm more scared of that.
That's interesting. I love that.
I quit and put it out there on Twitter that I was looking for a job. I don't advise anybody else to do this. Don't. This is like super risky. But I quickly had DMs full of people wanting to interview me. I was fortunate enough that I kind of built a reputation of knowing about social media marketing. But one of them was somebody at Amazon that was like, hey, I follow you. You know your social media, and you're also a huge nerd. Would you be interested in coming on board? We've got this new show called Invincible coming out, and we'd like you to help out with it. And and it was a freelance job. I'm like, you can't say no to that. So I was like, sure. And they're like, I was like, when do you want me to start? And they're like, well, when are you done? When are your 2 weeks notice over? I was like next week, but I promised my wife I would rake the yard. So can you give me like 2 days before I start? So on the Wednesday of the following week, I started working on Invincible, which led me to work on more into the entertainment industry as a freelancer, and I've worked on a lot of different accounts. We can talk a little bit more about that in a moment, but then finally got hired full time by a company called Chaotic Good Studios that does franchise management in the entertainment industry, and we do a lot of research work with larger franchises. Mostly, I can't talk a lot about it because I've got non-disclosure agreements, but mostly just really, really awesome nerdy stuff that I get to work on every day. So it's a blast. I love it. I get to do my two favorite things: social media and comics and other sci-fi, fantasy, all kinds of stuff. So it's a blast.
No kidding. Well, I mean, that's honestly that's the dream for anybody that loves this genre, right? Is being able to have a job, to live and just kind of dive into the geekdom or fandom that we love and get paid for it. So you're obviously living the dream with that, with your love for all the geeky stuff and social media. Like that sounds perfect for you. So I am definitely happy for you. A little bit jealous, but mostly happy.
I'm very lucky more than anything.
Yeah. Oh, I know. Yeah. And it's, but I know it's luck, but obviously, what put you out there was the fact that you've been able to create a reputation for what you know about social media marketing. And I think, this doesn't necessarily apply to like everything out there, but I think that really shows that when you're really excited and love and passionate about some sort of field and you really, exuberate that and show that off to the world and everything, like a lot of doors can open with that. And so, yes, it is luck, but I mean, don't put yourself down in terms of, how you really built yourself up with that presence on Twitter and other social media, and the fact that you are really knowledgeable of that field. Like that's what got their attention. So yeah, so I'm very happy for you. That's really cool. I know, I've talked to you about these things before on Twitter and everything like that. And it's just really cool to see how you've been able to make a career and living out of this. And it's really exciting. So I'm very excited for you. That's really cool.
Oh, thanks. It's been a lot of fun. And like I said, getting your pull quote and just seeing the word phenomenal and being like, oh, even though it's one word, that's me. There's this feeling of, seeing a tweet on the Invincible account or Radiant Black account or, and going, hell man, those are my words. That's something I wrote. And I'm not, when I was a kid, I wanted to be like a comic artist or writer. And like, I can't draw worth crap. And,
right.
But in a way, I can kind of give back and be a part of the creation of these things that we all love and help out in some way. And it's just really there are days I have to pinch myself. It's really awesome.
Oh yeah. Well, and I think you hit on the head too, because I'm the same way. I would love to get into comics professionally at some level, but just like we said, I'm not an artist by any means. I've never really written like a story, at least not to the extent of what authors are expected to write for comics and everything. But there's a lot of ways to be able to get into that field of comics that's not just directly as a comics creator, right? So people don't think about like social media or think about the other things that you can have. There's a lot of different kinds of jobs that are either for publishers or even companies that are associated with it. But for example, Comic Watch, we don't get paid for our reviews, but we do reviews because we really enjoy comics, and that's our way of giving back to the community, is to be able to do that sort of thing. And that's why a lot of people join Comic Watch to do that. It's not just to be able to read the comics and give their own opinion about it and get access to it a few days early, but just be able to kind of give back to the community, because it's done so much for all of us, not just the creators but just the community at large as well too. And so there's a lot of ways to give back and get involved that we just don't think about, that it's a lot bigger than just the creators and the issues themselves, but there's a lot of ways that we can get into it. So yeah.
So many people, so much work that goes into it just outside of that, and just to play a small role in it, it's amazing.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you very much for sharing that. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about superheroes and social media. For people who are not familiar with this, you're the director of social media for Chaotic Good Studios, and sometimes people will call that position, or will have a position called social media manager as well too. Can you explain for people who do not know this, what exactly does a social media manager or director of social media do?
Okay. Yeah. It varies depending on title. Like there's social media specialist, coordinators, managers, but directors, but vice presidents of social media. But social media manager is kind of the catch-all term for the job. And it varies depending on brand to brand. But the long and short of it is, we're the human beings behind those brand accounts that you see. If you're complaining on Twitter because your Starbucks got your order wrong, there is a human being behind that. And we do many different things, and some of us specialize in different areas. Some's more of a community manager role, that or customer service, where we're answering those customer complaints. Some of it is the content creation. We're writing the tweets, we're building the content, where some of us are out there with our cell phones taking the photos and posting them. Like the Oscars are on tonight while we're recording this. I'm sure there's social media managers frantically live tweeting live tweeting the event, and then building the strategy of like, what does this account sound like? We talk about brand accounts like Steakum. How did that become this account that is very social justice conscious, and it's meat, like it's selling frozen beef. Right. So building that and doing it in a way that helps the brand move forward. It matches those goals. Like at the end of the day, you gotta sell whatever widget you're doing, but also, for me, working in the entertainment industry, I feel like a lot of times we can be advocates for the fans. We're the ones listening and going, hey, this is what the fans want more of, and what can we give them on social media that makes them feel heard, or gives them more of the kind of content they want. That was a big thing on Invincible. It's like, okay, people love Alan the Alien. Where can we put more of him? And oddly enough, Omni-Man's butt is a very popular thing with the fans. So let's lean into that and make some Omni-Man butt jokes, because we're listening and kind of doing that. And then when people reply, we're in the reply saying, making jokes with fans and giving them that feeling of, they're paying attention to what we have to say. We can't do it for everybody. Sometimes there's just so much. And no, I don't know the exact date of season 2.
Yeah.
It's late 2023. That's
what everybody knows about, right? Yeah.
Yes. I know exactly what y'all know. So
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, thanks for sharing that. And I think that really kind of puts into perspective of what happens behind the screen and behind those accounts of, when something gets tweeted out, then like what's kind of the work that goes into it and the responses and everything. So keeping that in mind, let's talk about your specific experience with social media that are connected to comic book characters. You talked a little bit already about Invincible. Do you want to, expand a little bit more about that experience or other, brands or accounts that you've worked on?
So, of the comic book accounts that I've worked on, in Invincible, more I focus more on the animated series side of it than the actual comic book. But it's
Right.
it can't. They're two sides of the same coin. You can't really separate them sometimes.
Right.
And then I also work with Kyle Higgins and Black Market Narrative and all of the comics on that imprint. So Radiant Black, Radiant Red, Rogue Sun. No One comes out next Wednesday, which I don't know when this will go out, but that may already be.
It'll be Tuesday. So it'll be the
Tuesday.
day before.
Then go if you listen to this on Wednesday, like go pick up No One. I have read that in advance and heard the first episode of the podcast. It's going to be really cool. It's going to be something really special.
Yeah. And I've heard nothing but great things about it.
It's going to be neat. I got to have dinner with Kyle Higgins a while back, and he was explaining it to me, and like, oh yeah, I've got this idea. We're gonna have this, and there's gonna be an accompanying podcast, and there's gonna be social accounts that are real time and in character. And he's like, am I crazy for trying this? And I'm like, yeah, but you need to do it. So that's gonna be really neat. And then what's interesting about that is those accounts are run mostly in character.
Okay.
So with Invincible, that account is not. Some people think it's Mark tweeting, but no, that account is not in character. It is a social. We have a brand voice for it. I like to pretend, and when I'm writing though, I like to say like we have a portal into the Invincible universe. So like we're not in character, we're not in his universe, but like we can go like ask Battle Beast a question if we need to.
Right. Yeah.
But with the Radiant Black account, many of the tweets are we kind of slide in and out. Sometimes we need to like promote like issues coming out tomorrow. That's not Radiant Black talking, but we will do those in character. And that's a really fun challenge because you get to, for a little bit, like you get to be the character.
Yeah.
But that's also like a huge weight and responsibility. And I work when we do that, I'm always working very closely with Kyle. So I'm like not saying something that like, hey, make sure like I don't want to say something that we don't think Radiant Black would say.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the things I have thought about is when those accounts are in character is kind of your perspective on how much does a social media manager need to be aware of and kind of in tune with the character? Like, do they need to be almost like a diehard nerd? Do they have people that they, check these things, which sounds like you did with Kyle for Radiant Black and all that. But like for some of these other accounts, do you have a sense of, do they need to be immersed themselves, or do they have like people that they might like go out to and be like, can you check and make sure that this sounds like it would be in character for the person?
I can't speak to that for other people, but I would always be very careful, because one, especially some of these, like I love the Harley Quinn account. Like it's so good.
Yes.
It's in character. It's so well done. There was a time like, what was it? Or I can't remember which account it took. They took over, like Harley Quinn took over the Batman account. Like she's like,
that's account. Right. Yeah.
And for like a week, every day, a different like Rogues Gallery villain took over the account. So like the Joker had the account one day, like I can't remember which one, like the Riddler had the account for a day, and they were all kind of running character. And I think I speaking from the outside and looking in on that, like they had to, those characters are so iconic and everybody kind of knows so much about them that you have to be very careful. Like it's like when I was working with Cal, I was one thing I don't want. We did an AMA and Ask Me Anything with Radiant Black in character, where fans could ask him questions, and I was on a Zoom chat with Kyle. We're like, as people were asked, and we were like writing answers, and I was like, I don't want somebody to ask like, what's your favorite food, and me say, right, oh, my favorite food is, Swiss cheese. And then in issue, 27, we find out Radiant Black's lactose intolerant.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or backwards like that. Let's say you're doing the Harley Quinn account and you're like, someone asks you like, oh, this is simple. Like, what's your favorite color? And she says purple. And then in issue somewhere deep down, somewhere she said pink. Comic fans will figure that out. So those in character accounts, I think, have to be they're fun, but they have to be really careful in that regard. In respect, and you don't get to that role unless you like respect the character and the property,
right?
But again, like how long, as long as Batman's been around. You can't know everything.
I know.
So
I mean, yeah, that's the thing. And even if you
or have time to look it up.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and just like you said, even there's no way you can know everything. And even if you know, most of it, how many times have there been some sort of like reboot or contradictions or something like that? That just happens, not because, of something being malicious. Like, for example, Spider-Man, when the first issue of Spider-Man came out, Stan Lee forgot that he actually named the character Peter Parker. So that's why we had the Peter Palmer joke, and that Spider-Man was one word versus, it being hyphenated. And that was the very first issue of the character, and so there's always going to be those kinds of contradictions. But you're exactly right, is that there will be people out there that will be looking at it with a fine tooth comb, and will be picking it apart, and it can be brutal sometimes. And
it's an alternate jealous. Twitter timeline.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. But I like what you were saying with Invincible, is that it's not Mark, tweeting out, but it's almost like a narrator of the property, basically. And that's one thing that I've kind of noticed with some of these characters that I think you can kind of shed light with this as well too, is that, like what you said, Harley Quinn definitely lives in that style of the voices within the style of the animated series. And whenever, she tweets and all that, it sounds like it's the actual character, which I absolutely love. I love the series, by the way. I think it's a fantastic series. I can't say enough good things about it. But then you look at some accounts like Superman, Batman, that it's a Superman and Batman account, but it's not really a spoken in the character type of thing. It's just more of I don't want to say promotional, because it's not just promotional, but it's definitely just a lot more vague or broad. And so I think my question for you here is, when a company is looking at creating character, social media accounts, I guess two things here is that, why would they decide to have a character social media account instead of just putting it under their company name? So like, instead of Superman, why wouldn't it just put it under DC? But also, what might they think about why they would decide to have that account to be really in the voice of that character versus something like Batman, Superman, that tends to be a little bit more broad in that voice?
Well, a lot of it is because they're such broad franchises and there's so many different things that they're doing with it. Like, so if you're going to have a Batman account, which Batman is it going to be? Is it going to be Batman animated series? Is it going to be, Christopher Nolan Batman? Is it going to be, which one is it?
Yeah.
So it's much harder to do. And also you might have several things going on at once, because, you have the whole franchise. So you've got Batman the movie, you got a TV show, you've got comic books, you've got toys, you've got all of these other video games kind of have to play together nicely. So it makes it a little more difficult to do that, especially at the more iconic ones, I think. With a character like Harley Quinn or Peacemaker, they're both on HBO, and I think they've got kind of a little bit more play there because it's more dedicated to the show than anything. So they've got a dedicated voice that they can kind of follow without worrying about, okay, well, what, Harley Quinn's very, the tone of voice of HBO's Harley Quinn's very different than, Suicide Squad Harley Quinn,
yeah.
So I think they can kind of they're focused on one area. They can do that a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So that there's that. You kind of have to. You've got so many different players doing, and then also like same thing. Like if you're a comic book writer and you're writing Superman, there are rules that you're going to have to follow. Like you can't,
Right.
just start making up things that are going to be canon.
Yeah.
And I think if you're running one of those accounts, like, I'm not sure they trust a social media manager to be the voice of Superman. Like,
I get that. Yeah.
I'm not
Oh,
sure.
yeah.
I would love to try it, but I'm not sure I could handle that. The great power and responsibility, like the completely different character. But yeah, I
Mm-hmm.
don't think I could yeah, that would be a huge weight.
Oh yeah, I agree. Well, and talking about the different characters and making those decisions on how to represent them in social media and all that. There's one character that stands out for me that I remember when I realized this. I shared this with you, and it's just like, yeah, I remember noticing this a long time ago, and it's the Deadpool Twitter account because I remember going to the Twitter account. It had, so many million followers because it's such a popular character, especially with the movie and all that. And it shows that it was only following like one account. And I remember thinking, like, I wonder like who this is. Like maybe it's like X-Men or Marvel, or trying to think of like what other kind of account that he might be following. I forget what was the one that I've heard other people say that they thought it was going to be. And gosh, I can't even remember, like maybe Ryan Reynolds or something like that. But I remember when I clicked on it, I had to I laughed so hard, and I had to give props to whoever thought of this. But the only account is following is the Hello Kitty account, which again in the movie makes sense because in the first movie he had such an obsession with Hello Kitty that he had the Hello Kitty book bag and made references and stuff like that. So whoever came up with that was a genius, because I think that's just a small detail but goes a long way in terms of that is very much a Deadpool type of thing to do, right?
Mm-hmm. And this is the sort of thing fans notice, and
Mm-hmm.
it also says like, okay, this account isn't a it is still is a corporate account, but like
Right.
isn't just a corporate account. This is run by somebody who actually, or a team of people more likely that are also fans and actually do care about that, and that's something for the accounts that I work on. I want very hard for fans to feel that way, like, okay, the person behind this account is one of us. It's not just somebody who's never picked up an issue of the book in their lives, but is a fan
Right.
themselves. And you want that to come across.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, and I got to share my own story with Invincible that we've been talking about with that as well too. Is that I haven't read the comic book. I didn't watch the series until 3 weeks ago when I got sick with strep throat, and I just keep hearing people talking about how great of a show it is. It is a fantastic show. Like
Right.
it is so good. Like it's definitely, if you're somebody that do not like blood and the gory aspect of it, there's definitely a lot of that in there. I mean, animated kind of tones it down a little bit, so it's not as realistic, but it's definitely a lot in there. But the stories are just really good, in relationships and the dynamics. It is a fantastic series that I'm glad that I finally watched it, because I heard nothing but great things, but it's just like I didn't know who it was or anything about it ahead of time, so it just never really enticed me. And I'm absolutely sold. I know I can't wait for season 2, but at some point, I know I'm looking at your background with the 3 Invincible omnibuses that you have back there. At some point, I need to start reading the comics, because anytime I
It's so
watch a
good.
show, yeah, and Robert Kirkman created it, which he has a special place in my heart because he wrote the Daredevil 2099 issue that I absolutely love. There's only the one issue, but I absolutely love that one. And so I heard Robert Kirkman is the person that was in charge of this. I was like, this has got to be good.
He's great,
Yeah.
and the whole series. I'll be honest. Before I got offered, I hadn't read it.
Mm-hmm.
It came out while I was in grad school and had like 0 free reading time. And then after grad school, I moved to Japan, where you can find a lot of comics, manga, of course, but
Right.
finding English editions of American comics is in the small town I lived in was next to impossible. So
Right.
I missed it. And then, when I got offered the job, I picked up the first 3 trades and read through them, and I was like, man, yes, I'm hooked. This is awesome. And it only gets better. Like just as the series progresses, and I'm not going to shell too much for it, but like I'm a fan too now that like it has a solid beginning, middle, and end. There's you got 3 compendiums, and then it's over, and it has a satisfying conclusion. So definitely worth the read, and I'm eager to see where the show takes it.
Right. Oh yeah, definitely. And I know, like you said, a lot of people are waiting for it, and I think the show has probably brought a lot of people to the comics. Part of it, because that's what happens, right? Is when people are watching the characters in the show or in the movie or something like that, it does bring a lot of people to say, I want to learn more about this character because I get so enamored with it, and I just love the world that they built into this. I want more of it, and so that's what brings people into the comics. So I can only imagine that they're probably printing out more stuff because of the show.
Okay.
But the last question I want to ask you, and we've been kind of going into this a little bit, is when character account starts interacting with fans, right? They don't always interact with fans when they tweet something out or when someone tags them or anything like that. But there are times when the accounts are very active. So, for example, when we're talking about Deadpool, that account is not very active right now because there's just nothing going on until the movie comes out. But when it is active, then you'll see the character account reply to fans or interact with fans or things like that. What are some of the things that social media managers have to think about when they decide to respond to a fan who like tweets at them or replies or something like that? Like, I imagine there's probably a strategy not only of how they're going to respond, so it's in the voice of Deadpool and all that, but there's probably another strategy that's going on in terms of we're going to be selective about which ones because we want to make sure that we're pushing this sort of theme or voice or something like that as we're interacting with fans.
Yeah, we're always listening and like checking our app mentions and also doing social listening of like, even if we're not mentioned, we want to kind of, it's a little bit harder because invincible, the word is harder to do a search for, but always looking for people talking about the I say property, but it feels weird, like the comic or show or whatever. So we want to chime in. Like I'll give you an example with not in character, but like we want to make a fan's day whenever we can,
right?
And we can't always do that. But there was one. It's one of my favorite social media moments on Invincible. There was a guy, and he tweeted at us, and he's like, "Hey, my son." We went to the comic book store and he wanted to do his best Invincible pose. And he did the pose with Invincible that was like on issue 1 up against a wall. He's wearing an Invincible shirt that looked like the costume. And I saw that and I ran to my computer and I photoshopped his son into I took Mark out and put his son into the first issue. And just said, tell your kid we think he nailed it. And to me, that's just like, that surprise moment that he opened up his phone and saw that and showed it to his kid, and like that's something they're going to just treasure forever.
Yes.
And anytime we can do that to me is something that's important. In character, it's a little bit different. We want to be sure, okay, can we make this work? And even in with Radiant Black, we try to do it like in the timeline too. So like we're like, okay, well, this has happened in January between months, that doesn't always work quite right, but but that's one thing we try to do. Do we add something to it? There is, I hate to even mention, but we do like a quick check of people's profiles before we respond, like just to make sure they're not Nazis, right. And that there's somebody that we're okay with interacting with. It's not going to end up becoming something that gets out of hand.
Right.
So that's something we have to be cognizant of. And also we're aware of like the people that are repeatedly talking about us, and we want to keep them interested. So like, as long as they're pleasant, we try to interact. We had one, guy who's just awesome. For Invincible, every episode had its own show poster. I've got them hanging up on my wall over here. But they so every Friday when the new episode came out, we dropped the poster. I said, new episode's out. Here's the show poster. And every Friday, immediately he had his notifications on. Like immediately after he dropped it, he say, "Poster needs more Alan. Poster needs more Alan." So by the end of the season, we were ready for him. And like, okay, we dropped the show poster. Poster needs more Alan. And I had photoshopped Alan into the poster. And it's like, here you go, and then for like the final episode, same new poster. Here you go. And the guy like framed them and put them in his house. And that, to me, that's phenomenal, right?
Yeah.
That's that sort of thing. Like, he doesn't know, like, I'm here in my home office and just outside Little Rock, Arkansas, and made this,
Right.
that to me, that's really cool. And anytime we can do that, and granted, we can't do that for everybody, but
right.
We can find those opportunities to engage and make a fan's day. It's just, it's just, there's no words for it. It's phenomenal.
Yeah. Exactly. No, but I love that because it is, trying to do those little things. And it's not, and what I love about that is that it's nothing that really, from a brand point of view or from, a company point of view, you did something that was like low effort, low cost type of thing that's not costing the company like a whole lot, but it makes that fan's day, week, year, even just being heard in that regard, and that's exactly what it is that the fans loves to be, acknowledged and appreciated. And it doesn't have to take a whole lot to be able to show that. It's just something as simple as that can really, go a long way. And I absolutely love hearing a story like that. That's probably, that's one of my favorite stories now, just hearing about how I'm ready for Alan to, put him in the poster and all that. That's so great. I love that. So awesome. Well, thank you very much. Yeah. So I think that's all the questions I had for you about social media and superheroes. I know you've been running, the social media account for Invincible and everything. Is there anything else about that account that you want us to know about, or something that we, maybe fans don't really realize about the social media account for Invincible or anything? That you can say.
What can I tell?
Yeah.
What can I say? It's a group effort. There's folks at Amazon, folks at Skybound work on it. It's a labor of love. And we just we care about the fans, and we're glad to see them. And at the end of the day, we can make a bunch of memes and butt jokes about Omni-Man, but we do it because one, it is our job and we promote the show, but we're fans ourselves.
Right. Awesome. Well, thank you. So we're going to end this episode by talking about the comics that we're currently reading. So I'm going to ask you, Jon-Stephen, what comics you're reading. I'm going to share what I'm reading, and then we're going to end it with some of the submissions that people from Comic Watch, our Discord that we have, and people on Twitter had shared what they're reading. So let me go ahead and ask you, Jon-Stephen, what comics are you currently reading right now?
Well, I am way behind on stuff and catching up. I'm a father of a 6-year-old, so I'm like always like a few years behind on stuff on my reading. But today I just finished N.K. Jemisin's Far Sector, which was awesome, so much fun.
Yeah.
Just a real fan. I love her novels, and to see her kind of take on Green Lantern was really cool. And I'm going to be catching up on DC stuff for preparing for James Gunn's take on DC. So next in my queue is Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow.
Yes.
So I'm probably going to pick that up tonight right after we get done talking. And then other than that, I'm doing an Invincible reread, preparing for season 2. Of course, I've just figured like I'm just going to read the whole series again, not just what might be in seasons 2 and 3. So just I'm between things. I'm always like picking up another issue of Invincible and kind of doing a reread there. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Nice. No, those are great picks. I really love those. For me, I just finished up reading an issue of The Joker, the Man Who Stopped Laughing, and I gotta say, this series is definitely one that I think deserves a lot more attention because it's a phenomenal series. But it's really great because the story, pretty much lays out that there's two Jokers, so we don't know which one's the real one, basically. But it goes along the lines of this one Joker, thinks he's the real one, the other one thinks he's the real one. The one Joker keeps getting like killed, or he should have been killed off, and he's not dying. So he doesn't know why. He went to a hospital. They don't know why. And so there's a lot of mystery kind of built behind this. But it's just every issue just kind of ups it up a notch, and it's just a fantastic read. So I think it's one of those series that doesn't get mentioned enough. So that's why I wanted to bring that up for today's episode, because I just finished reading that one, and it's one of the few issues that I absolutely look forward to whenever I pick it up. I also bought a while back the entire collection of Tom King's Batman Catwoman, which I don't know how many issues in it, but it's a hardcover. It's a pretty thick book as well too. So I am trying to get through my unread pile this year and try to get caught up. So by the end of the year, all I'm doing is reading my new books that I'm getting. Batman is like the largest stack of comics that I have that I need to go through. And so that's why I wanted to start with Batman Catwoman, is to try to get that pile. Because I feel like once I get that pile done, everything else should be kind of like a snowball effect. But it's definitely taken a while to get to that. But so that's what I'm going to be reading pretty soon here. So let's look at what other people are reading this week. And from Comic Watch, we have Tyler Davis that said, I am finishing up Tom Taylor's Son of Kal-El run, and then is going to be doing a massive catch up with the last 4 years of X-Men, X-Force, Excalibur, Wolverine, and Immortal X-Men, with all the X events in between. Which we had a joke. We said, good luck, because you're probably going to be, taking the next 5 years figuring out, like reading through it and trying to figure out, getting caught up, because there's so many of those stories and there's just so much going on that it is hard.
I was thinking about this, if somebody wants to like tweet me later, if they're listening, I'm Matt J. Stansel. I was thinking, I love X-Men, but I'm so far behind. Like, where's a good spot to jump back in? Because there's cool stuff happening, but I don't know where to like dive back in. So
I know
I'd be curious to hear what recommendations folks have.
Yeah, I had that same question because I had just finished reading about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. I read the entire collection of House of X Powers of 10, which is what kind of set this whole X-Men storyline up. And I asked people, I said, I just don't have the time or capacity to read all the X-Men books series to get caught up, because there's just so much going on. So I just asked people, like, what is the one that you think would be the best one? And the number one answer I got from a lot of people is the Immortal X-Men, because that one, every issue kind of focuses on a different character as part of the council for Krakoa, but it gives you kind of fills in of like what's been going on in the other stories as well. So it doesn't give you all the details, but at least gives you enough so that way you can kind of still follow the story. But I'll say this, when I read those books, I absolutely love it, but I'm still confused as heck, like really, really bad. But I still enjoy it at the end of the day. So I don't know all that's going on when I'm reading just the one series. But it's still a fantastic read. I really been enjoying all of them. Right now, they've kind of did another like big event with a Sense of Sinister, where now they don't have the like Immortal X-Men running now, but they have 3 series, which is like Nightcrawler, Storm and the Brotherhood of Mutants, and Immoral X-Men. So not Immortal, but Immoral X-Men going on. But yeah, so there's so much going on. They do their best to try to fill you in a little bit, but yeah, there's just a lot. And I think at some point they're going to try to bring him back down, so that way there's not so many like going out. I think they're going to do another major event to try to reel it back in at some point. So, but if you're looking for one, Immortal X-Men I think is a really good one, and then the other ones, probably Immoral X-Men, because it still kind of goes with Immortal in terms of looking at the different characters and kind of fills you in with the other ones as well too. But even Rogue and Gambit is still kind of part of that series as well too, even though it's not like Sins of Sinister. They're still talking about what's been going on with Krakoa and what they've been doing as well too. So yeah, there's a lot.
Add that one to the list.
Yeah, exactly. Gabriel De Jesus said, I'm binge X reading, knocked out Orlando's Marauders and Knights of X. So, all the books that we were talking about earlier. Then got Immortal X-Men and Legion up to Judgment Day. It's definitely reminded me both of what I love and hate about this era. So I even forgot, like, there's all these other books and spin-off that happened before we got into the Sins of Sinister. So they definitely kind of scaled it down, but there's just so many because they had, Lives and Deaths of Wolverine and like Swords of X and all that. So,
what I wish they would do would be awesome if they, because, the way I got caught up as a kid was the X-Men trading cards. And they had all like the stories on the back, and like you could just like, I didn't read Dark Phoenix Saga because I was like 21, but I knew what it was because I had the trading cards when I was a kid. Like, and they just put like all the trading cards in a book. Those 90 trading cards. I would love for those to come back again. Those were so much fun.
I know, yeah, or some version of that, right? Because I remember when I was a kid, you could get all that stuff, and it's all kind of telling the same story as well too. And for me, the Phoenix Saga, I didn't get exposed to until the X-Men animated series did that. And I just remember like bits and pieces here and there and everything, but I never really read it in the comics, but that's where my exposure was in the animated series. But that's a great idea. At least it's something to kind of give you those, like snapshots, like overview. So that way you kind of know what's going on in each of those stories. B-Rad says, I'm rereading the 1991's Mutant Genesis books, trying to remember why I fell in love with comics to begin with. I don't think I've heard of Mutant Genesis. Have you?
I've heard of it, but I haven't had a chance to dive into it.
Gotcha. I'm going to have to look into that now. So, and then Anthony Bergamini said, I'm just getting into Superman Godfall. I'm really enjoying it. It's different than the average Superman story, kind of more of a drawn out version of For the Man Who Has Everything. That's another Superman story I have not read either. Is that one that you've read or heard of before?
No, I haven't, but I'm getting back into Superman now, so I'll have to pick that one up.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Well, and I'm surprised how many Superman stories are out there. I guess I knew there were some, but I didn't realize how many kind of versions of Superman that has been written over the years and everything. So I'm really surprised to learn like just so many series and sort of stories of Superman that has not only the story of him, but just kind of like different takes on it. That sounds really interesting. So yeah, so Godfall I've never heard of before, so I'm gonna have to check that out as well. You'll like this one because from our Illuminati Discord, which is a Discord server that me and a couple other podcasters are running to kind of create a community for other people who enjoy, nerdy stuff and comics and films and stuff like that. Kim from the ODPH podcast says that he's reading Adventures of Superman John Kent, Black Cloak and Monarch from Image. No One #1, which is the latest edition in the Massiverse, is what he said with the companion podcast. So he's already, on top of all that as well. He's been saying some great things about that. He's the one that I've actually heard about Radiant Black and Radiant Pink and all of that. He keeps talking about it.
I have interacted with him from the brand accounts. So yes.
You know what? What's funny is in the Discord,
I know
he
the
said
name,
that. Yes. He's like, he's probably going to remember me as that guy that keeps interacting with them.
And keep on at it.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And then he says that he's catching up on Berserker from Boom Studios as well. He said Adventures of
another one on my list.
I know. Well, and especially I didn't realize until much later, because I've always heard of Berserker, but I didn't realize till much later that Keanu Reeves was the person behind it, which made sense. I should have known because I remember one of the issues, like the cover, I was like, that looks a lot like Keanu Reeves, But yeah, so Ken said that Adventures of Superman John Kent by Tom Taylor kicks things off with a huge test for the young hero with the new focus on family steel. This is a perfect jump on point for new long-time readers, which I have not had a chance to read that, but I read some of Kal-El's 18-issue story arc and absolutely loved that. So I'm sure I would love this once I start reading it. Matt Martin from the Panel to Panel podcast said he's reading Venom from Donny Cates, The Flash, Clear, and the latest Moon Knight series. And then Joe Loves Comics said that apart from the weekly polls he has of Batman, Fantastic Four, and Clear, which he loves, he has been reading Four Kids Walk Into a Bank from Matt Rosenberg and Tyler Boss this week and really enjoyed it, which is interesting. He shared that because Matt Rosenberg is the person that wrote Joker, the Man Who Stopped Laughing that I was talking about earlier. So I'm definitely gonna have to check that out because of that. But I have not heard of 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank, so I'm kind of really
I
curious.
love the title.
Yeah, right. Like, because you're thinking like it's like a setup to a joke, you know. So now it's very intriguing to see what it's about. And then on Twitter, we have at Fett Bizarro said Tom Taylor's Boba Fett stuff right now. He's really digging it. And I didn't realize Tom Taylor was writing a Boba Fett series, so that's really cool. And then the art from Chris Scalf in the series is tight as heck, and he might start up Punk Rock Jesus tomorrow, which I did not realize there was a comic series called Punk Rock Jesus. So I don't know if I'll read it, but I definitely want to just kind of read a synopsis and see what it's about. I think it's really interesting. And then at Year of the Loser said Scarlet Witch #3 was such a beautiful book this week. I like the storytelling through Wanda, which is very soothing. And Batman the Joker, the Deadly Duo #5 shocked me in a good way with the reveal of the villain in the end. Big oof is what he said. Yeah, Scarlet Witch is a really good book. I read the first issue and I thought it was really good. And from what somebody had told me is that Scarlet Witch is doing something similar to what like the Human Target was doing, where every issue it's a kind of dedicated on a particular character that Wanda is helping. So she kind of has like almost like a mystical detective agency thing like set up to where people might need her help. This automatically comes through this portal that she has in her shop. And what's funny is I don't know if you know that about this, Jon-Stephen, but Scarlet Witch #1 makes Darcy from the MCU, from the Thor movies, now comic canon because that's her first appearance in the comics as Scarlet Witch #1, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So so I absolutely love the series for that, but I think there's something to say about the model of writing stories where every issue is kind of dedicated on like a different problem with a different character. It's definitely more episodic, and I think that it's been really successful when people have been implementing that lately. So
yeah, that's always nice. You can kind of have a little one and done.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, exactly. So awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for sharing what comics you're currently reading this week. Jon-Stephen, thank you very much for coming on the show to talk to us about superheroes and social media. Before I let you go, where can people find you and your work online?
You can find me across all socials. I'm at JS Stansel on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, all over. And my personal website, just jsstansel.com. And also you can follow Invincible HQ, follow Radiant Black, Black Market Narrative, all those. And I'm one of the voices behind some of them sometimes.
I love that. And I'll make sure to put the links in the show notes as well, too. So, well, thanks again for joining the show. I really appreciate you coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's my 2 favorite things to talk about.
And that wraps up another episode of The Captioned Life. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button. You can follow us on social media at Captioned Life. For more information about us and all of our previous episodes, visit thecaptionedlife.com.